Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the stars through the main window. He had been exploring space for 12 years now, and he still loved the way the stars looked in the deep black. His ship was not the biggest or the newest, but it was home to him and his crew of 43 humans. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation. For almost 50 years, they were still one of the smaller members, with only Earth and 6 colony worlds. The big alien races like the Altarians and the Vegan Council controlled most of the galaxy. Humans were respected enough, but they knew their place in the grand scheme of things. Lieutenant Sarah Kim sat at the communication station, her fingers dancing over the controls. She had been with Jake for 3 years and was one of his best officers. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge. Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "It's a distress signal, but it's not using any Federation frequency. The signal is weak and keeps breaking up. It's coming from the edge of our scanning range near the dead zone." The dead zone was what spacers call the empty area between star systems. Nothing lived there. Nothing was supposed to be there. Jake frowned and looked at the navigation display. There were 3 days from the nearest Federation outpost. "Can you clean up the signal?" Sarah worked for several minutes, adjusting filters and boosting the power. Slowly, a voice came through the static. It was speaking in broken Federation standard, the common language used by all member species. "Help, please help, dying so many, dying." The voice was not human. It sounded tired and desperate. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How many ships are out there?" His science officer, Dr. Lisa Parker, looked up from her station. She was a tall woman with graying hair who had studied alien life for 20 years. "Sensors show one massive object. It's big, Captain. Really big, maybe 10 times the size of our ship." Jake made his decision quickly. "Set course for that signal. Maximum speed," Captain said his first officer, Commander Rick Stone. "We don't have orders to investigate anything in the dead zone. Earth Command expects us to complete our survey mission in the Kepler system." Jake looked at his friend and second in command. Rick was a good officer, but he always followed the rules. "Rick, someone out there is asking for help. That's all I need to know." Horizon changed course and pushed its engines to full power. For 6 hours they traveled toward the mysterious signal. As they got closer, Dr. Parker's sensors showed them more details about what they were approaching. "My God," she whispered. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake hurried to her station and looked at the display. The object was indeed a ship, but it was like nothing he had ever seen. It was huge and shaped like a long cylinder. Parts of it were clearly damaged, with holes in the hull and sections that looked like they might break off at any moment. "It's a generation ship," Dr. Parker said, "built to carry thousands of people on long journeys between stars. But look at these readings. The power systems are failing. Life support is barely working. And there are massive population signs." "How massive?" "Over 50,000 life forms, Captain, and they're from dozens of different species." Jake felt his mouth go dry. 50,000 aliens in a dying ship. Any idea what they're doing out here? Before Dr. Parker could answer, Sarah's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, I'm getting a clearer transmission now. A new voice came. Through the speakers, this one sounded stronger but very tired. It spoke in accented Federation standard. Unknown vessel, please respond. This is Elder Murren of the transport ship. Forgotten Hope. We have been drifting. For 2 years, our systems are failing. And our people are dying. We beg for your assistance. Jake picked up the comm microphone. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Horizon. We hear your distress call and we're here to help. What is your situation? There was a long pause before Elder Myron answered, Captain Morrison, we are refugees. The Federation Council declared us unfit for civilization. We were ordered to leave all settled space and never return. Our ship is dying and we cannot repair it. Rick Stone stepped closer to Jake. Captain, this sounds like an internal Federation matter. We might be getting involved in something. That's none of our business, but Jake was already thinking about those 50,000 lives floating in the dark. Elder Murren, permission to come aboard your ship. We want to help. Another long pause. Captain Morrison, I must warn you, we are the broken ones. The galaxy has rejected us. Your Federation considers us worthless. If you help us, you may face their anger. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. Sarah Kim nodded at him. Dr. Parker was already gathering her medical supplies. Even Rick, despite his concerns, was preparing the shuttle bay. They were all good people, and good people helped when they could. Elder Murren, prepare to receive our shuttle. We're coming aboard. An hour later, Jake, Dr. Parker, and 4 other crew members docked with the massive generation ship. The airlock opened with a grinding sound that suggested the mechanisms were barely working. The air that came out was stale and filled with strange smells. Elder Murren was waiting for them. She was unlike any alien Jake had ever seen. She stood about 5 feet tall with pale blue skin and large sad eyes. Her clothes were patched and worn. Behind her stood several other beings from different species, all looking thin and tired. Captain Morrison, Elder Murren said, her voice barely above a whisper, you came. I did not truly believe you would come. Dr. Parker was already scanning the aliens with her medical equipment. Captain, they're severely malnourished. Many of them are sick. Elder Murren led them through the corridors of the ship. Jake had seen refugee camps before, but nothing had prepared him for this. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were crowded into spaces meant for far fewer people. Children with strange colored skin and unusual features played with broken toys. Adults lay on makeshift beds too weak to move. The smell of sickness and despair filled the air. We are the Kiri, Elder Murren explained as they walked. We were farmers on the world of Keth Prime until the Federation gave our planet to a mining corporation. When we protested, they said we were too primitive to own such valuable land. She pointed to a group of tall, muscular beings with gray skin and fierce eyes. Those are the Zephians. The Federation said their warrior culture was too violent for modern civilization. They were not allowed to join the military or police forces anywhere. In another section, Jake saw beautiful beings with flowing movements and voices like music. The melody, Elder Murren said, their songs were declared primitive noise by the Federation's Cultural Committee. They were forbidden to perform in any civilized world. As they continued the tour, Jake met dozens of other species. Each had been rejected by the Federation. For different reasons, some were called too backward, others were called too dangerous, some were said to be economically worthless. Dr. Parker was taking readings and notes the entire time. When they returned to Elder Murren's quarters, she pulled Jake aside. Captain, these people aren't inferior at all. The Cathari have agricultural knowledge that could feed entire worlds. The Zaphians are natural soldiers and protectors. The Melody have abilities I don't even understand yet. They were cast out not because they were worthless, but because they were threatening to someone. Jake looked out the window of Elder Murren's quarters at his ship floating nearby. The horizon was small and not very powerful, but it represented something important. It represented hope. Elder Murren, he said, how many of your people can we fit on our ship? The elderly alien looked confused. Captain Morrison, you cannot take us anywhere. We are exiles. The Federation will punish anyone who helps us. Jake smiled for the first time since boarding the generation ship. Let me worry about the Federation right now. I'm more concerned about getting you and your people somewhere safe. He activated his comm unit and contacted his ship. Sarah, get me a direct line to Earth. Command Priority 1, Rick Stone's voice came back immediately. Captain, are you sure about this? Earth Command isn't going to be happy about us picking up 50,000 refugees without permission. Jake looked around at the desperate faces surrounding him, children with strange eyes but familiar hope, adults who had lost everything but still tried to take care of each other, elders like Murren who had somehow kept their people together through 2 years of drifting in the void. Rick, patch me through to Admiral Sullivan at Earth Command. Tell her I have a message that can't wait. Few minutes later, Admiral Kate Sullivan's stern face appeared on Jake's comrade. She had been his mentor when he first joined the space service, and she knew him well enough to read his expression. Jake, Rick tells me you found something out there. Talk to me. Jake took a deep breath. Admiral, we found something the galaxy threw away. 50,000 refugees from species the Federation declared worthless. Their ship is dying and they've been drifting for 2 years. Admiral Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Jake, refugee situations are handled through proper Federation channels. This isn't our problem, Admiral Jake said, looking directly into the camera. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office on Earth, staring at the reports covering her desk. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Morrison found the refugee ship, and the problems were getting bigger every day. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. The door chimed and her aide, Lieutenant Ben Carter, entered with more papers. Admiral, the Galactic Federation ambassador wants another meeting. He's demanding we return the refugees immediately. Kate rubbed her tired eyes. What's our status on the integration centers? We have facilities ready on Earth, Mars, Colony, and New Houston. Engineer Danny Chen says the old mining stations in the asteroid belt can house another 10,000 refugees with some work. Kate nodded. Danny was one of their best engineers, practical man who could solve problems with limited resources. And the medical situation, Dr. Amy Rodriguez reports that most of the refugees are responding well to treatment. The malnutrition cases are improving, and we've learned to treat the alien diseases. But Admiral Some of the refugee groups are having trouble adjusting. Kate looked up from her reports. What kind of trouble? Ben shifted uncomfortably. They don't trust us, ma'am. Many of them think this is some kind of test or trap. They've been hurt so badly by other species that they can't believe anyone would actually help them. Kate sighed deeply. She had expected this problem. When people had been beaten down for so long, kindness seemed impossible to believe. What about the Federation? Ambassador is furious. He says we're interfering with Federation justice and that these species were exiled for good reasons. He's threatening economic sanctions if we don't return them. Kate stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the busy spaceport below. Ships were coming and going, carrying supplies to the refugee centers and bringing more refugees from the generation ship. It was the biggest humanitarian operation in human history. Lieutenant, get me a connection to our integration centers. I want to see how things are really going. On Mars colony, social worker Peter Williams was having the hardest day of his career. He sat across from a group of Zephian warriors who looked ready to fight at any moment. Their leader, a massive gray skin being named K-Tall, glared at him with yellow eyes. You humans keep us in cages, Kak said in his deep voice. You feed us strain food and ask us to live in peace with our enemies. This is not how warriors should be treated. Peter kept his voice calm and steady. He had worked with difficult people before, but these aliens were different. They were trained fighters who saw kindness as weakness. Crackle, these are not cages. These are temporary homes until we can find permanent places for your people. Temporary clad. The Altarians said our exile was temporary too. They said if we were good and quiet, we could come back someday. That was 3 years ago. Another Zephian warrior, smaller but with scars covering his arms, leaned forward. Human, why do you really want us here? Do you plan to use us as soldiers? Do you want us to fight your enemies? Peter shook his head. We don't want you to fight anyone. We want you to live in peace and find ways to contribute to society that don't involve war. K.C. Tall laughed bitterly. We are warriors. It is what we are. You cannot change our nature any more than you can change the color of our skin. Before Peter could respond, the door opened and a human veteran named John Hayes walked in. John had lost his left arm in a mining accident 5 years earlier, but he had volunteered to help with the refugees. He looked at the Zephians without fear. I heard you talking about being warriors, John said quietly. I used to be a soldier myself. Crack looked interested despite himself. You fought in wars. I fought in the border conflict with the Centauri traders. 3 years of fighting pirates and raiders. I know what it's like to be trained for war and then have to find something else to do. The scarred Zephian leaned forward. What did you find? John smiled. I found out that protecting people doesn't have to mean killing enemies. I work in disaster relief now. When earthquakes or storms hit our colonies, I help rescue people and rebuild communities. I still use my warrior training, but now I fight against disasters instead of against people. Crackle was quiet for a long moment. You think we could do such work? I think warriors who truly want to protect people can find many ways to do it, John said, but it has to be your choice. No one can force you to change. In the new Houston facility, music Teacher Carol Smith was having her own challenges. She sat in a room with several Melody refugees, including a young female named Whisper of Dawn. The Melody were beautiful beings with long limbs and voices that seemed to make the air itself vibrate when they spoke, but Whisper of Dawn had not sung since arriving 3 weeks ago. The Federation music critics said our songs were primitive noise, Whisper of Dawn said. Sadly, they said we had no understanding of real art or beauty. Why would humans be different? Carol had been a music teacher for 20 years, and she knew talent when she heard it. The few times she had heard Melody speak, normally their voices contained harmonies that human singers spent years trying to achieve. Whisper of Dawn, would you be willing to listen to some human music? I'd like to show you something. The Melody looked suspicious but nodded. Carol activated her audio system and played a recording of a human choir singing an old Earth song called Amazing Grace. The voices blended together in perfect harmony, rising and falling like waves on a shore. When the song ended, Whisper of Dawn had tears in her large eyes. This is beautiful. Your people understand harmony and emotion in music. Yes, we do, and I think your people understand it even better than we do. Would you like to try singing with some human musicians just to see how our styles work together? Whisper of Dawn was quiet for a long time, then very softly she began to hum a melody. The sound filled the room with something that was more than music. It was like hearing the voice of the universe itself. Carol felt chills run down her spine. That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. For the first time since her arrival, Whisper of Dawn smiled. On Earth, in facility outside the capital city, Dr. Amy Rodriguez was working with the Cathari refugees. These were the farmers whose world had been taken away, and they were having different problems. They wanted to work, but they were afraid their methods would be rejected like everything else about their culture. Elder Murren sat with Dr. Rodriguez in a small garden behind the facility. The elderly Cathari was looking at the earth. Plants with professional interest. Your soil is good, Elder Murren said, picking up a handful of dirt and examining it, but you grow your food in a wasteful way. Too much water, too much space between plants. Dr. Rodriguez was fascinated. Could you show us better methods? Elder Murren looked surprised. You would want to learn from us. The Federation said our farming was outdated and inefficient. The Federation was wrong about many things, weren't they? Elder Murren nodded slowly. We fed 17 billion people on Keth Prime with half the land area you used to feed your colonies. Our methods work with nature instead of fighting against it. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward eagerly. Would you be willing to teach us? We have colony worlds that struggle to grow enough food. For the first time since Dr. Rodriguez had met her, Elder Murren looked excited. You would trust us with such important work, Elder Murren. We need your help. Our colonies have been failing at farming for decades. We've been too proud to admit we don't know what we're doing. Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, a human child named Lucy Martinez was playing with a group of young Cathari. She had been coming to the refugee center with her mother, who worked as a volunteer cook. Lucy shared her sandwich with a young Cathari named Smallroot, who was about her age but much thinner. Smallroot looked at the sandwich suspiciously. It's okay, Lucy said. It's peanut butter. And jelly, it tastes good, small root. Took a small bite and his eyes widened. This is wonderful. What is peanut butter? Lucy giggled. It's made from ground up nuts. My mom makes the best sandwiches in the whole world. Small root smiled shyly. On my world, we made sweet bread from grain that grew near the rivers. I could show you how if you want. That sounds great. We could make it together. Two children continued eating and talking, completely unaware that they were helping solve one of the biggest problems in the galaxy. They were just being friends. Back in her office, Admiral Sullivan was reading reports from all the integration centers. The news was mixed. Some refugee groups were adjusting well, while others remained suspicious and hostile. The economic cost was enormous, and the political pressure from the Federation was getting stronger every day. Her communication system chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Federation Council. Ambassador Velter's face appeared on her screen. He was a tall, thin alien with pale skin and cold eyes. Admiral Sullivan, the Federation Council has voted. You have 48 hours to return all refugees to the designated exile zone, or we will impose full economic sanctions on all human worlds. Kate kept her face calm. Ambassador, these people are not prisoners. They are refugees seeking a better life. They are exiles who have been legally banished from civilized space. Your interference with Federation justice is an act of rebellion. We see it as an act of compassion. Dr. Amy Rodriguez stood in her laboratory on Earth, staring at the data on her screen with growing amazement. For 2 months, she had been studying the refugee species, and what she was discovering changed everything she thought she knew about them. The Cathari soil samples were impossible. According to every scientific model, their farming methods should not work, yet somehow they could grow 3 times more food using half the water and no artificial fertilizers. Their plants grew faster, stronger, and more nutritious than anything human science could produce. She picked up her communicator and called Dr. Lisa Parker, who was working at the New Houston facility. Lisa, you need to see what I found. Can you come to Earth? Dr. Parker's voice sounded excited. Amy, I was just about to call you. I've been studying the melody vocal abilities, and I think I know why the Federation was really afraid of them. What do you mean? Their songs don't just make beautiful music. They affect quantum fields. When Whisper of Dawn sings certain notes, my instruments detect changes in the basic structure of matter around her. Amy felt her heart racing. Lisa, get here as fast as you can. We need to talk. 2 days later, Dr. Parker arrived at Amy's laboratory with a transport full of data and recordings. The 2 scientists worked through the night comparing their findings with reports from all the refugee integration centers. Look at this, Amy said, pointing to her computer screen. The Cathari don't just grow food efficiently. Their methods actually improve the soil over time. They're not farming, they're terraforming. They could turn dead planets into garden worlds. Lisa nodded and pulled up her own data. And the melody aren't just singers. Their quantum field manipulation could revolutionize our technology. They could potentially control matter at the atomic level just by singing. What about the Zapirians? I've been reviewing John Hayes' reports from the Integration Center. These aren't just warriors, Amy. Their combat techniques use principles of physics that our military doesn't understand. They can predict enemy movements by reading tiny changes in air pressure and electromagnetic fields. Amy sat back in her chair. The Federation didn't exile these species because they were inferior. They exiled them because they were becoming too powerful, too independent. Lisa agreed. Imagine if the Cathari controlled food production across the galaxy, or if the Melody developed their abilities further, or if the Zephyrians trained other species in their combat methods. Amy's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Admiral Sullivan. Both of you report to my office immediately. We have a situation. When they arrived at the Admiral's office, they found Captain Morrison already there, along with Engineer Danny Chen and several other senior officers. Admiral Sullivan looked tired and worried. I've been reviewing your reports, the Admiral said without preamble. Are you telling me these refugee species have abilities that could change the balance of power in the galaxy? Dr. Parker nodded. Admiral, we're only beginning to understand what they can do. But yes, if these abilities were fully developed and shared, they could revolutionize everything from agriculture to defense to manufacturing. Engineer Danny Chen leaned forward. Admiral, I've been working with the refugees to modify our facilities. Some of the things they've suggested shouldn't be possible, but they work perfectly. The Shimmer refugees can create force fields that are stronger than our best military shields, and they do it with crystals and sound waves. Admiral Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Captain Morrison, what's the status of the Federation's ultimatum? We ignored their 48-hour deadline 3 weeks ago. Ma'am, since then they've imposed economic sanctions on all human worlds. No Federation members allowed to trade with us or provide us with supplies. And how are we handling that? Danny Chen smiled slightly. Better than expected. Admiral, the refugee technologies are helping us become more self-sufficient. The Cathari farming methods have increased food production on our colony worlds by 200%. We're actually producing surplus food for the first time in decades. Admiral Sullivan stood up and walked to her window. Below she could see construction crews working on new facilities. Many of the workers were refugees working alongside humans to build a better future for everyone. There's something else, she said without turning around. We've been receiving secret communications from other species in the Federation, minor races that have been oppressed or ignored. They're asking if we would be willing to accept them as refugees too. Captain Morrison looked surprised. How many species? 17. So far they represent almost a quarter of the Federation's membership. It seems our actions have inspired others to consider whether the Federation is really serving their interests. Dr. Parker felt excitement and fear in equal measure. Admiral, if we accept more refugees, the Federation will see it as an act of war. They already see it that way, Admiral Sullivan said grimly. Ambassador has demanded a meeting with the Federation Council. Our sources suggest they're planning military action to force us to return all refugees. Room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Humanity was small compared to the major Federation powers. In a direct military conflict, they would be overwhelmed quickly. What are our options? Captain Morrison asked. Admiral Sullivan turned back to face the Room, we have three choices. First, we can surrender and return all refugees to the Federation. Second, we can try to negotiate some kind of compromise. Third, we can prepare for war and hope. We can defend ourselves long enough for other species to join us. Engineer Danny Chen cleared his throat. Admiral, there might be a fourth option. I'm listening. What if we don't wait for the Federation to attack us? What if we take the initiative and offer protection to any species that wants to leave the Federation? We could create our own alliance based on cooperation instead of domination. Dr. Parker looked thoughtful. The refugee technologies could give us advantages the Federation doesn't expect. If we combined human adaptability with Cathari terraforming, melody quantum manipulation, Girian combat techniques, and all the other abilities we're discovering, we might be able to defend ourselves. Admiral Sullivan finished, but it would be incredibly risky. We'd be betting the survival of humanity on the hope that these refugee species would fight alongside us. Captain Morrison stood up. Admiral, I'd like permission to return to the refugee centers. I want to talk to the refugee leaders directly. They deserve to know what's happening and to have a voice in what we do next. Admiral Sullivan nodded. Permission granted. Take Dr. Parker and Dr. Rodriguez with you. I want to know exactly what we're capable of if this comes to a fight. 1 week later, Captain Morrison stood in a large meeting room at the Mars colony facility. Representatives from all the refugee species were gathered around a circular table. Elder Murren sat with other Cathari leaders. Crackle represented the Zapirians. Whisper of Dawn spoke for the melody. Dozens of other species were represented. The mood in the room was tense. Everyone knew that the Federation fleet was gathering at the edge of human space. War seemed inevitable. My friends, Captain Morrison began, humanity faces a choice. We can surrender you to the Federation and hope they forgive us, or we can stand together and fight for the right to choose our own path. Elder Murren spoke first. Captain Morrison, the Federation is powerful. Their fleets have conquered hundreds of worlds. What makes you think we could resist them? Crackle slammed his fist on the table. Because we are not the same broken people they exiled. Human kindness has reminded us who we truly are. The Federation made us weak by making us believe we were worthless. But we are not worthless. Whisper of Dawn's voice rang with harmonies that made the air shimmer. The Federation fears our abilities because they know what we could accomplish together. They want to keep us divided and helpless. A representative of the crystalline shimmer species spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Our defensive technologies, combined with human engineering and Zapirian tactics, could create new forms of warfare the Federation has never seen. Elder Murren looked around the table at all the different species. For 3 years we drifted in space, believing we had nothing left to offer the galaxy. But humans showed us we were wrong. We do have something to offer. We have each other. Captain Morrison felt hope growing in his chest. Are you saying you're willing to fight? We are saying we're willing to live. Crackle replied, and if the Federation wants to take that away from us again, they will have to go through all of us. The room erupted in voices as representatives from every species voiced their agreement. They would stand with humanity. They would fight for their new home. But even as they made This decision, none of them fully understood what they were starting. Federation's response would be swift and overwhelming. The coming battle would test not just their military abilities, but their commitment to the idea that different species could truly work together. 3 days later, Admiral Sullivan received word that the Federation fleet had entered human space, 200 ships carrying the most advanced weapons in the galaxy were heading toward Earth, but humanity would not face them alone. In the refugee centers across human space, former outcasts worked alongside their human friends to prepare defenses that the galaxy had never seen before. The Federation fleet appeared at the edge of human space like a storm cloud. Filled with lightning, 200 ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to destroy anyone who opposed them. Admiral stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Dominion, watching the human worlds grow larger on his screen. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, the humans are not responding to our demands for surrender. All their planets show signs of military preparation. Belter smiled coldly. Of course they are preparing. They think their primitive weapons can challenge the might of the Federation. They will learn the price of defying galactic law, but did not know what was really waiting for him in human space. In the 3 months since the refugees arrived, something new had been born, an alliance between species that the galaxy thought was impossible. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center, deep beneath the capital city. Around her, humans and aliens worked side by side at control stations that looked like nothing the Federation had ever seen. Curie engineers had grown crystal computers using their terraforming techniques. Melody singers maintained quantum communication networks that could not be detected or jammed. Shimmer technicians had created shields that bent light and energy around them. Admiral reported Commander Lisa Torres, who had returned from a secret mission to the Galactic Rim. Our allies are in position. 17 species have agreed to join us when the fighting starts. Kate felt nervous but determined. 3 weeks ago, Lisa had traveled to the outer edges of Federation space, carrying a simple message to every oppressed species she could find. The message was that they did not have to face their oppressors alone anymore. What about our defenses here, engineer? Danny Chen looked up from his station. All planetary shields are active. Admiral, the refugee technologies have given us capabilities the Federation cannot predict. Their sensors will show them what we want them to see. At another station, Dr. Lisa Parker monitored the quantum field networks. That whisper of dawn in her fellow Melody had created. Admiral, the Melody report they can disrupt Federation weapon systems, but only at close range. We need to let them get close before we reveal our true capabilities. Kate nodded. What about our fleet, General? Chris Taylor answered from his position at the military command station. We have 43 human ships, Admiral, but each one now has mixed crews of humans and refugees. The Zafarans have taught our pilots combat techniques that seem impossible but work perfectly. Our ships are smaller than Federation battleships, but they're faster and more maneuverable than anything the Federation has seen. Beside him, K-Tau stood tall and proud in his new uniform. The Zephyrian warrior had become the chief military advisor for the Alliance. Admiral Sullivan, my people have analyzed Federation battle tactics for generations. They are powerful but predictable. They rely on overwhelming force and expect their enemies to fight by the same rules they do, and we're not going to fight by their rules. Kate said we are going to fight by our rules. Crackled with something that might have been a smile. On the outer edge of the solar system, Captain Jake Morrison sat on the bridge of his ship, the UES Horizon, but his ship looked very different now. Shimmer crystals had been grown into the hull, creating shields that could make the ship nearly invisible. Cathari biotechnology had replaced many of the ship's systems with living components that could repair themselves. Melody quantum resonators hummed softly, ready to disrupt any enemy sensors that got too close. His crew was no longer entirely human. His navigator was a Cathari named Swift Current, who could read space like a farmer reads soil. His weapons officer was a Zahirian warrior named Stonefist, who understood combat in ways that human militarimies never taught. His communications officer was a Melody named Song of Stars, whose voice could send messages across the galaxy instantaneously. Captain Swift Current reported, Federation advanced scouts are approaching our position. 12 light cruisers moving in standard patrol formation. Jake activated his ship's communication system. All ships, this is Morrison. Remember the plan. Let them see what they expect to see until we're ready to show them the truth. The Federation scout ships detected the human fleet exactly where their sensors said it should be. 43 small ships hiding behind an asteroid field, clearly trying to avoid the superior Federation force. Scout Commander reported back to Admiral with confidence, Admiral, we have located the human fleet. They appear to be attempting a defensive action behind the asteroid belt. 43 ships, all smaller than our light cruisers. They pose no significant threat. Belter was pleased. Excellent. Order the main fleet to advance. We will destroy their fleet quickly and then proceed to their planets. This rebellion will end today. But as the Federation fleet moved deeper into the solar system, things began to happen that their tactical computers could not explain. Ships that sensors showed were hiding behind asteroids suddenly appeared in completely different locations. Weapons that should have been fired from the human ships seemed to come from empty space. Communication systems that had worked perfectly for centuries began to fail for no reason. On the Dominion's bridge, Velter watched his tactical display with growing confusion. What is happening to our sensors? Admiral, we're detecting quantum field fluctuations throughout the system. Something is interfering with our targeting computers. Velter had never heard of quantum field fluctuations affecting military equipment. Can we compensate? We're trying, Admiral, but the interference patterns keep changing. It's like the enemy is controlling the basic forces of physics. That was exactly what was happening. Hidden throughout the solar system, groups of melody singers were using their abilities to create quantum static that made Federation sensors unreliable. The songs they sang were not just beautiful music, they were weapons that attacked the mathematical foundation of enemy technology. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison led his ship and 5 others in a daring attack on the Federation's left flank. The ships moved like dancers, weaving between Enemy fire with impossible grace. Spherian combat instincts guided every movement, allowing human pilots to dodge weapons that should have been impossible to avoid. Now Song of Stars Morrison ordered the melody communications. Officers sang a complex harmony that resonated through the quantum fields. Around them, suddenly the 6 human ships seemed to multiply. Federation sensors detected dozens of ships where only 6 existed, all moving in different directions and firing from impossible angles. The Federation squadron that was pursuing them opened fire on targets that were not really there, while the real ship struck from directions the enemy did not expect. In less than 10 minutes, 12 Federation warships had been disabled or destroyed by 6 ships that should not have been able to fight them at all. Admiral Velter watched the battle reports with growing alarm. How are they doing this? Our ships are more advanced, our weapons are more powerful, our crews are better trained. His tactical officer looked confused and frightened. Admiral, they're not fighting like any enemy we've encountered before. They appear to be using technologies we don't understand. Before Velter could respond, new contacts appeared on his sensors. Ships were emerging from hyperspace all around the Federation fleet, but these were not human ships. They were vessels from dozens of different species, all converging on the battle. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're being contacted by ships from the Sarvan Republic, the Shimmer Collective, the Helix Alliance, and 14 other species. They're demanding that we withdraw from human space immediately. Could not believe what he was hearing. Those are Federation member species. They cannot oppose us. Admiral, they're saying they're no longer Federation members. They've joined something called the Free Worlds Alliance. The tactical situation was becoming impossible. What had started as a simple punishment of rebellious humans had become a galaxy-wide uprising. Species that had been loyal Federation members for centuries were suddenly fighting alongside the humans and their refugee allies. At the center of the battle, Elder Murren worked with human engineers to coordinate the defensive networks they had built throughout the solar system. Key terraforming technology had been used to create hidden bases inside asteroids and on the surfaces of moons. Each base was connected to the others through quantum communication networks that the Federation could not detect or intercept. The Federation is trying to retreat to a defensive formation, she reported to Admiral Sullivan, but our allies are preventing them from regrouping. On her screen, Kate could see the battle unfolding across the entire solar system. Federation ships that had expected an easy victory were now surrounded by enemies they had not known existed. The refugees that the Federation had thrown away were now leading the fight against their former oppressors. Admiral General Taylor reported, the Federation flagship is trying to break through our lines and escape. Should we let them go? Kate thought for a moment. If our escaped, he would report back to the Federation Council about the new alliance and its capabilities. The Federation would have time to prepare for a longer war. 5 years after the Battle of Terra, Admiral Kate Sullivan walked through the gardens of New Geneva, the capital city of the Free Worlds Alliance. The city had been built using technologies from dozens of different species, and it looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Qatari bioarchitecture had grown the buildings from living materials that cleaned the air and provided food. Shimmer crystals created beautiful light. Displays that also served as communication networks, melody quantum. Resonators hummed softly in the background, maintaining the force fields that protected the city from space, debris, and hostile weather. But what amazed Kate most was not the technology. It was the people. Human children played games with young Cathari, their laughter mixing with the musical voices of melody. Youngsters, Syrian warriors, worked as city guards alongside human police officers, protecting everyone regardless of species. In the markets, beings from 40 different worlds traded goods and ideas in a dozen languages. Admiral Sullivan, a familiar voice, called behind her. Kate turned to see Dr. Lisa Parker approaching with a group of visitors. Dr. Parker now served as the Alliance's chief xenological officer, helping new species integrate into their growing society. Lisa, good to see you. Who are your guests? Dr. Parker gestured to the group of tall, pale beings walking nervously behind her. Admiral, I'd like you to meet some refugees from the Altarian Empire. Their government has collapsed, and they're seeking asylum with us. Kate looked at the Altarians with interest. 5 years ago, the Altarians had been one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, ruling over dozens of worlds and commanding fleets that could destroy entire star systems. Now they looked thin and desperate, wearing patched clothes and carrying small bags containing everything they owned. What happened to your empire? Kate asked gently. The leader of the group, a female named High Scholar Melvara, looked ashamed. Admiral Sullivan, our government tried to maintain control through fear and oppression. When the Free Worlds Alliance showed that cooperation was stronger than domination, our subject worlds began to rebel. Within 2 years, our empire crumbled. Parker nodded. The Altarians are not the first former Federation species to ask for our help. The Vegan Council, the Centauri Trade Federation, and even some worlds from the core systems have sent refugees to us. Kate felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The Free Worlds Alliance had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but success had come at a cost. The old galactic order was collapsing, and billions of beings were caught in the chaos. High Scholar Melvara, the Alliance welcomes all people who come in peace and want to build a better future, but you should know that we do things differently here. Everyone works, everyone contributes, and everyone has a voice in how we govern ourselves. Melvara looked surprised. You would give us political rights even though we once oppressed other species? We believe that people can change, Kate said. Some of our best citizens are former Federation officers who chose to join us instead of fighting us. As they continued walking through the city, Kate reflected on how much had changed since that day when Captain Morrison found the refugee ship. The Free Worlds Alliance now controlled almost half the galaxy, but they had gained that territory not through conquest but through invitation. Species after species had chosen to leave the Federation and join the Alliance, attracted by the promise of equality and cooperation. The war with the Federation had lasted 3 years. It had not been a traditional war with massive fleet battles and planetary invasions. Instead, it had been a war of ideas fought world by world and system by system. Every time the Federation tried to force a member species to remain loyal. That species would appeal to the Alliance for protection. Every time the Federation imposed harsh punishments on rebellious worlds, those worlds would declare independence and ask to join the free worlds. The final battle had come not in space, but in the Federation Council chambers, when 2/3 of the member species voted to dissolve the Federation and join the Alliance. The old galactic government simply ceased to exist. There had been no dramatic surrender, no treaty signing. The Federation had died, not from military defeat, but from the realization that most of its people no longer wanted it to exist. Kate's communicator chimed with a message from Captain Morrison. He was now Admiral Morrison, commanding the Alliance exploration fleet that was making contact with species in previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. Kate, we've found something interesting in the Outer Rim, a generation ship carrying refugees from the old hegemony wars. They've been drifting for almost 50 years. Kate smiled. How many, Jake? About 30,000. Mostly species we've never encountered before. They're asking if the Alliance would be willing to take them in. Tell them they're welcome here. Send Dr. Parker's team to help with the integration. Kate ended the transmission and continued her walk through the city. In the distance, she could see the memorial that had been built to honor all the species that had been cast out by the old galactic order. The memorial was a simple stone monument with words carved in 100 different languages, all saying the same thing: here the galaxy's unwanted found their home. Here the future began. Near the memorial, a group of children from dozens of different species were playing together. Kate recognized some of them. There was Lucy Martinez, now 15 years old and studying to become a xenological engineer. She was teaching a group of younger children how to build crystal computers using shimmer technology and Cathari bioengineering. Small Root, the young Cathari who had shared sandwiches with Lucy 5 years ago, was now an agricultural specialist, helping to terraform new worlds for refugee populations. He was showing the children how to make plants grow in soil that had never supported life before. Whisper of Dawn sat nearby, singing softly while she worked on a quantum resonator that would help coordinate the children's projects. Her songs had evolved over the years, combining melody techniques with musical styles from dozens of other species. The result was something entirely new, a form of music that could literally reshape reality. Admiral Sullivan, a young voice called out. Kate turned to see a human boy running toward her. His name was Alex Chen, and he was the son of engineer Danny Chen. But Alex was different from most human children. He had been born after the Alliance was formed, and he had grown up with aliens as his closest friends and teachers. Admiral, we're building a new type of spaceship for our science project. Wanna see? Kate followed Alex to where the children had constructed a small model ship using materials and techniques from a dozen different species. The ship's hull was grown from Cathari biomaterials. Its power source was a miniature version of shimmer crystal technology. Its navigation system used melody quantum resonance, and its defensive systems were based on Zephyrian combat principles, refined by human engineering. This is amazing, Kate said, examining the model closely. Does it actually Work, we tested it yesterday, Lucy said. Proudly, it can travel between star systems using half the energy of traditional ships, and it can repair itself if it gets damaged, Kate realized. She was looking at the future. These children, raised in a society where cooperation between species was normal, were creating technologies that their parents could barely imagine. They were not limited by the old assumptions about what was possible when different species worked together. What are you going to call your ship? Kate asked. Alex grinned. The Unity, because it brings together the best ideas from everyone. That evening, Kate returned to her office in the Alliance government building. On her desk was a report from the integration centers throughout Alliance space. The numbers were staggering. In 5 years they had welcomed over 10 million refugees from collapsed governments, failed empires, and oppressive regimes. Each group had brought new knowledge, new technologies, and new perspectives that made the Alliance stronger. But the report also contained troubling news. There were still regions of the galaxy where the old ways persisted. Some species had responded to the collapse of the Federation by becoming more militaristic and xenophobic. They saw the Alliance as a threat to be destroyed rather than an example to be followed. Kate's door chimed and Admiral Morrison entered. He looked tired from his long journey to the outer rim, but his eyes were bright with excitement. Kate, you need to see what we found out. There, the refugee ship wasn't just carrying survivors from old wars. It was carrying scientists and engineers who have been working on technologies we've never seen before. They've developed ways to terraform entire star systems in months instead of years. Are they willing to share their knowledge? Jake smiled. They said they've been waiting 50 years for someone to ask them that question. The previous galactic governments were only interested in their military applications. Kate felt hope and determination filling her heart. Jake set up integration centers for our new friends and schedule a meeting with the Alliance Council. I think it's time we started planning for the next phase of our growth. As Jake left to begin the arrangements, Kate walked to her window and looked out at the city below. In the streets, beings from dozens of worlds were going about their daily lives, working together and learning from each other.